She returned home from the airport, still grieving, still gentle. Maggie Reynolds, retired teacher and widow, expected quiet. Instead, she heard her son's voice from the next room. Get the will before Mom finds it. By sunrise, every account would be locked, every document sealed, every plan of his undone. He thought she was fragile. He forgot she was educated, patient, and perfectly capable of strategy. That night, a mother stopped mourning and started protecting. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The automatic doors at Bluegrass Airport hissed open as Maggie Reynolds stepped into the chill of the Kentucky evening. The smell of jet fuel mixed with rain on asphalt, and somewhere in the distance, a plane engine whined like a fading memory. She clutched her leather purse close, her fingers brushing the worn edge of the envelope that still carried her late husband's handwriting. It was supposed to be a routine trip. 3 days in Atlanta to finalize a pension transfer, a quiet errand in the wake of loss. But as she steered her car down the slick streets toward her brick home on the outskirts of Lexington, something inside her tightened. A small, sharp instinct that something wasn't right. When she arrived, the house was dark except for a single light bleeding from the kitchen window. Her own key felt heavier than usual. She turned it slowly in the lock, careful not to announce her arrival. The soft hum of the refrigerator met her first, then voices. Low, hurried, coming from the den. Maggie froze just beyond the archway. "We need to get the will before Mom sees it," James whispered. Her breath caught. Samantha's reply was a faint hiss. "You said she wouldn't be back until tomorrow." "I thought so," James said, voice tense. "If she finds the old one, it's over. We have to act tonight." Maggie's pulse hammered. Her son's voice, the same boy who once brought her hand-picked daisies after every spelling bee, now sounded cold, calculating. She pressed her back against the hallway wall, gripping the strap of her purse to stop her trembling. For several seconds she listened, each word carving another line into her chest. "She keeps the documents in that safe in her study," Samantha murmured. "You know the code. Just do it while she's gone." "I'll handle it," James said. "We'll say we were organizing her files." Maggie's throat went dry. Every instinct screamed to storm into the room to shout, "How dare you!" But decades of teaching had honed a certain kind of patience in her, the kind that waits for a misstep before lowering the final grade. Instead, she backed away, moving soundlessly down the hall toward her bedroom. Once inside, she closed the door without a click and leaned against it. The quiet pressed in around her like water. Her phone buzzed. A text from Helen Porter blinked across the screen. "Call Victor now." Maggie exhaled shakily. Helen always had timing that bordered on uncanny. Her friend had been her late husband's confidant as well, the one who helped Maggie navigate paperwork, grief, and the endless legal labyrinth that followed his death. Maggie slipped her purse onto the bed and opened it. Inside, neatly folded between a scarf and a stack of receipts, were her husband's notes. His handwriting slanted but steady. "If anything happens to me, trust Victor. Keep the papers separate." Her eyes burned. For months after his funeral, she had followed every instruction with mechanical precision. She'd filed, stored, notarized, signed, and never once suspected that her own son might try to undo it all. In the next room, a floorboard creaked. She held her breath. "James," Samantha whispered. "Did you hear something?" "Probably the wind," he muttered. "Let's just finish this." Maggie eased the zipper of her purse shut. Her mind was already running through steps. Verify the will, contact Victor, secure the house, document everything. She knew better than to confront them without proof. A teacher's discipline, a widow's resolve. She took one last look toward the door. Her reflection faint in the mirrored dresser, hair tousled from travel, eyes clear now, alert. The shock was giving way to something colder, steadier. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft and deliberate, like an omen. She reached for her phone again and typed back to Helen. I heard them. Starting now. Then she set the phone face down, straightened her shoulders, and opened the drawer of her nightstand. Inside lay a small black notebook, a habit her husband had encouraged when they handled family finances together. Every transaction, every conversation, every detail. She turned to a blank page and wrote, in firm, precise letters, October 25th. Returned from airport. Overheard James and Samantha discussing will. Intent, theft. The words steadied her pulse. Another faint sound, the creak of the study door. Maggie's pen stilled. She closed the notebook, tucked it beneath a folder of insurance papers, and rose to her feet. The den's light flickered against the hallway, the shadows moving like quiet conspirators. Maggie moved toward the noise, step by measured step. When she reached the edge of the hallway, she could see James kneeling near the safe, his shoulders tense, Samantha watching the door. And Maggie, calm now, heart silent, eyes unblinking, knew she had just crossed the line from grief into strategy. The storm outside broke before dawn. Rain tapped against the study window as if urging Maggie to move faster, to act before the quiet house stirred awake. Her reflection in the glass looked almost unfamiliar, calm but alert, her gray hair catching the first light of morning. She walked to the safe, still slightly ajar from James's failed attempt hours earlier. Her hand didn't shake as she swung the metal door open. Inside lay an orderly arrangement of documents, insurance papers, certificates, and at the very back, a slim manila envelope bound with a blue ribbon. Her late husband's handwriting stretched across it in clean, deliberate strokes. Last Will and Testament of Robert Allen Reynolds. Maggie drew a deep breath, steady and deliberate. She carried the envelope to the oak desk and set it beneath the lamp's glow. For a moment, she only stared at the seal, tracing the embossed notary stamp with her thumb. It had been 2 years since she'd last seen it. 2 years since Robert's passing. 2 years of trusting that their son would do the right thing when the time came. She broke the seal with the edge of her letter opener and unfolded the pages carefully, smoothing the creases with her palm. The scent of paper and ink filled the air, oddly grounding, like an anchor in chaos. Her eyes moved down the legal phrasing, line after line. The words were precise, unyielding. Robert had left clear instructions: Maggie as executor, trustee of all assets until her death, and the final authority on charitable disbursements. James's inheritance was contingent upon financial responsibility and ethical conduct. There was no room for misinterpretation, no loophole for greed. She felt a faint, fierce satisfaction bloom in her chest. He knew. Her phone buzzed again. Helen's name lit the screen. Maggie hesitated only long enough to glance toward the hallway. Silent. She answered. Maggie? Helen's voice was low, urgent. Did you see the will? I did, Maggie whispered. It's exactly as Robert left it, ironclad. Then we move fast, Helen said. Every word counts, every move matters. You document everything, you hear me? I've already started, Maggie replied, her voice gaining edge. They were in the study last night. He tried the safe. Helen exhaled sharply on the other end. Then we'll make sure his fingerprints are all over the wrong choices. A small, grim smile tugged at Maggie's lips. Exactly. When the call ended, she took out her notebook again. Under the previous night's entry, she began a new line. 5:45 a.m. Retrieved Robert's original will. Seal intact. Confirmed legal language unchanged. Each word gave her back a piece of control. She turned to her laptop next, pulling up her online banking dashboard. The estate accounts glowed on the screen, balances steady and untouched. Still, she knew better than to trust appearances. James was impulsive but resourceful. His career in real estate had given him just enough financial literacy to be dangerous. Maggie opened a secure chat window with Victor Hayes, their estate attorney. She typed quickly. Victor. Urgent. I believe James intends to access my husband's will and accounts. We need confirmation of current validity and asset protection. She attached digital copies of the will's key pages, scanning them one by one with calm precision. Within minutes, a reply appeared. Understood, Mrs. Reynolds. I'll verify and file a temporary safeguard notice within the hour. Do not alert him. Keep everything as normal. The words steadied her like a hand on her shoulder. Victor had been Robert's most trusted ally for decades. He would know exactly how to make the legal walls airtight. As she worked, the faint creak of floorboards reached her ears again. James, moving upstairs. Maggie froze, then minimized the banking window and gathered the documents into a neat stack. She returned the will to the safe and locked it firmly, turning the dial with deliberate slowness until it clicked shut. From the hall, she could hear the faint sound of water running. James, making coffee, pretending at normalcy. Maggie sat at the desk again, opening her notebook to write. 6:10 a.m. James awake. Behavior casual. No mention of last night. Will secured. Outside, the rain began to ease, a muted hush over the roof. She let herself breathe for the first time since arriving home. The plan had shifted now. No longer defense, but quiet offense. She rose, slipping the notebook into her cardigan pocket, and walked to the kitchen. James turned when she entered, forcing a smile. Morning, Mom. You're back early. Maggie returned the smile, serene and unreadable. Early enough, she said. How was your night? His eyes flickered just long enough to confirm what she already knew. Uneventful, he said. Good, she murmured. I like uneventful. She poured herself coffee, every motion steady, deliberate, and silent as strategy itself. By mid-morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, painting narrow stripes across Maggie's notebook and the half-finished mug of coffee beside it. The house had settled into an uneasy quiet. James had left for meetings, his laptop under one arm and guilt stitched into his posture. Samantha had followed shortly after, pretending to forget her sunglasses twice before finally driving away. Maggie waited until she heard the faint crunch of gravel fade from the driveway before she moved. She stood and went straight to the study. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. On the desk, a small pile of files waited, her next battleground. Maggie opened the top drawer and began pulling documents in measured order. Property deeds, life insurance statements, brokerage summaries, trust allocations. Each sheet was a lifeline, a piece of evidence in a story she now had to control. She slipped them into a leather portfolio, tightening the strap like armor. At exactly 9:15 a.m., she called the bank. The line clicked, followed by a smooth, professional voice. This is Clara Lynn, Private Banking Division, Lexington Trust. How can I assist you today? Clara, it's Maggie Reynolds, she said. I believe you're familiar with my late husband's account. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds. Of course. How are you? Focused, Maggie said. I need to initiate a protective review on all linked accounts, personal and estate. I'd like a full freeze authorization pending my attorney's confirmation. There was a pause. Understood. Are you anticipating unauthorized access? I'm anticipating attempts, Maggie replied. Quietly process it. No notifications. The typing on the other end was fast, confident. Clara had handled Robert's accounts for years. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. I'll mark them as restricted. You'll receive verification within the hour. No one can move a cent without dual confirmation. Maggie's shoulders eased slightly. Thank you, Clara. Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. We'll keep this between us. When the call ended, Maggie allowed herself a slow exhale. It wasn't victory yet, but it was movement, the kind her husband would have admired. She turned to her laptop again, opening Victor's secure message from earlier that morning. New attachments appeared, a legal memorandum and a note in his brisk, lawyerly tone. Confirmed. All protections enforceable. You have sole authority. Recommend documenting household interactions discreetly. Suggest visible deterrence. Security cameras, time-stamped records. Maggie read the line twice, her lips tightening with thought. Then she reached for the small box she'd kept since Robert's last hospital stay, an unused set of home surveillance cameras he'd purchased just in case. By noon, she was kneeling by the bookshelf, threading cords behind framed family photos and porcelain figurines. One camera angled toward the study door, another toward the hallway where voices tended to linger. She moved carefully, making sure no wire betrayed her intentions. When she was done, the room looked untouched, still warm, still lived in. But now every corner carried eyes. She sat back, studying the lens reflection in the muted lamplight. "You wanted to protect us, Robert," she murmured. "Now I'll finish it." The soft buzz of her phone broke the stillness. A message from Helen. "Status?" Maggie replied with a single word. "Protected." Seconds later, the phone rang. Helen didn't bother with pleasantries. "Are you holding up?" "I'm past holding up," Maggie said quietly. "I'm building walls." "Good. Just remember, document everything. Don't react unless you need to. You're teaching them a lesson they'll never forget." Maggie allowed herself a faint smile. "Oh, I plan to grade this one carefully." Outside, a car door slammed. She moved to the window and saw James's sedan pulling back into the driveway, Samantha in the passenger seat. They were home early. Maggie's pulse quickened, but her movements stayed smooth. She closed the laptop, slid the portfolio into the locked cabinet beneath the desk, and turned off the lamp. Within seconds, she was once again the picture of an ordinary morning. From the den, muffled voices rose, James's tone sharp, Samantha's strained. "Are you sure she didn't see?" Samantha whispered. "She was half asleep this morning," he said. "She won't suspect anything. We'll try again tonight." Maggie sat in her armchair, pen poised above her notebook. Her expression didn't change as she wrote. 12:47 p.m. James and Samantha returned. Discussion indicates continued intent. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the study camera's faint light, the one hidden behind the clock. It blinked once, recording, capturing every word they'd regret. She folded her hands in her lap, a calm figure beneath the ticking clock, as the trap began to tighten around them. The following afternoon stretched long and silent, the kind of quiet that hums beneath the surface of tension. Maggie sat at her desk, a fresh pot of tea steaming beside her, the air fragrant with chamomile and strategy. Her laptop glowed faintly against the shadows creeping across the study. On the screen was Victor Hayes's face, framed by shelves of law books and muted light from his office window downtown. "I've reviewed everything," he said in his usual calm, deliberate tone. "The will, the trust directives, the beneficiary codes. Maggie, your position is unshakable. You have full executor power and guardianship authority. No one, not even your son, can override it without your explicit consent." Maggie nodded, her hands folded neatly before her. "Then, they're already too late." "Still," Victor continued, leaning forward slightly, "I'm filing a redundant guardianship record with the county clerk this evening. Belt and suspenders, as Robert used to say. And Maggie, don't confront them yet. Let them make the next move." "Understood." Her voice was cool, unwavering. After the call, she checked her calendar. Her flight from Atlanta had arrived exactly 12 hours before the hour James and Samantha had planned their organizing session. She highlighted the timestamp in her notes. Everything was aligning. Every moment was being cataloged. The cameras hummed quietly from their hidden perches. Every blink of the indicator light felt like a heartbeat she didn't have to waste. From the kitchen came the muffled clink of glassware. Maggie rose, smoothing the wrinkles from her cardigan, and walked down the hall. She paused just before the doorway. James's voice drifted through the room, low and conspiratorial. "So, are you ready to take it tonight?" Samantha let out a shaky laugh. "You're serious?" "Of course I am. She's distracted, tied up in those bank calls. I checked. She hasn't been to the county records in months. The will's just sitting there." Maggie's pulse tightened. She leaned against the doorframe, just out of sight, every muscle still. "What if she notices?" Samantha asked. James's tone hardened. "Then we play innocent. She forgets things lately. She won't even realize it's gone until we fixed it." Maggie closed her eyes for one long second, memorizing every word. When she opened them, the calm had returned, sharper than before. She turned silently and walked back to the study, her slippered feet soundless against the hardwood floor. She jotted down their words verbatim in her notebook, each phrase crisp and dated. Her handwriting was steady, her emotions now methodical. She wasn't afraid anymore, only calculating. Her phone buzzed. A message from Helen. "Preparing the secondary packet now. Photocopies, notarized statements, timestamps, all filed under our joint proof log." Maggie smiled faintly. "Always 2 steps ahead," she murmured. Another text came seconds later. "Every move matters. Don't let them see you sweat." Maggie typed back, "Never do." Outside, the afternoon deepened into a dim golden hue. Through the lace curtains, she could see James pacing near his car, phone in hand, gesturing sharply. Samantha stood beside him, arms folded, her expression uneasy. Maggie poured another cup of tea, the rhythmic motion soothing. The porcelain clinked softly against the saucer. She carried it to the window and sat in her armchair, letting the steam curl up into her face as she watched. James was animated, almost giddy. A boy who thought he was playing a clever game. She recognized that gleam in his eye, the one that used to appear when he cheated at Monopoly as a teenager. Recklessness masquerading as confidence. But this time, she had the board, the rules, and every piece in her hand. She sipped her tea slowly, eyes never leaving the window. A faint vibration sounded on her phone again. Another email from Victor. County filing confirmed. Legal guardianship and executor status verified. No external claims possible without judicial review. You're locked in. Maggie's lips curved into a quiet smile. "Thank you, Victor," she whispered to herself. In the distance, thunder rolled again, the same slow rumble that had followed her home from the airport 2 nights earlier. A fitting echo. Down the hall, she heard the front door open and close, followed by muffled voices and footsteps retreating upstairs. She knew exactly what they were discussing, exactly what they planned. She wrote one final note in her book for the day. 6:42 p.m. James confirmed intent to take it tonight. All protections active. Cameras recording. Proof pending. Then she leaned back, the pen still between her fingers, the faint hum of the cameras filling the silence like a mechanical heartbeat. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a deep, measured breath. The air tasted of tea, cedar, and inevitability. The night broke with the sound of wind against the shutters and a sudden burst of rain that drummed hard against the roof. Maggie was already awake. She had been for hours. The glow from her laptop painted her face in quiet determination as she typed one final message to Clara Lynn. Proceed with the full freeze authorization. All linked accounts, all trust branches, immediate execution, effective midnight. She clicked send and leaned back, the soft creak of the chair the only sound in the room besides the storm. Within minutes, Clara's confirmation came through. Done. Every account locked. Dual authentication on your credentials only. Attempted transfers will trigger silent notifications. Maggie stared at the words, feeling the weight of them settle like steel in her chest. The trap wasn't set anymore. It had sprung. Downstairs, the house was silent except for the faint shuffle of movement. She caught the soft murmur of voices, James and Samantha, their footsteps quick, their urgency clumsy. Maggie muted her phone, slipped it into her pocket, and quietly opened the live camera feed on her laptop. There they were, her son and his wife, standing before the study safe like actors in a badly written play. James's fingers punched the keypad, his jaw tight. Samantha hovered, wringing her hands. "Why isn't it opening?" he hissed. "It's the same code, James. Try again." He did. The red light blinked. Denied. Maggie watched from the shadowed doorway upstairs, invisible and silent. Her pulse remained even. She had expected this moment to hurt, but it didn't. What she felt instead was distance, a teacher watching a student fail an exam he thought he could cheat through. When James slammed his fist against the safe, the sound cracked through the quiet house. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "The accounts too. Everything's blocked. My access is gone." Samantha fumbled for her phone. "I'll call the bank. Maybe it's a system error." Maggie smiled faintly. Clara had already anticipated that. From the bank's side, all outgoing calls linked to unauthorized inquiries were being redirected to an internal queue marked Restricted Client Activity. Samantha would get nothing but a polite automated tone and silence. Sure enough, the line clicked, then dropped. She tried again, panic now audible in her breath. "It's not going through," she whispered. "James. It's not. Damn it." He turned, pacing, his face flushed and wild. It's like she knew. Like she planned this. Maggie pressed her palm against the banister, steadying herself. "I did," she thought. Her phone buzzed softly. Another message, this one from Victor. Injunction filed and accepted. County clerk confirmed 9:08 a.m. No individual other than you may access, copy, or contest the will. Everything's airtight, Maggie. And then, a second message from Helen. Watching the feed. It's working. Keep steady. Maggie allowed herself a single slow breath. She'd shared the camera access with Helen earlier that morning, one of those small, meticulous steps that made all the difference. Helen would have a complete record of this night from her laptop miles away, every word preserved, every desperate glance captured. Downstairs, the panic had turned to confusion. James yanked open drawers, rifling through paperwork, muttering under his breath. She must have changed something. Where's the key to this? There isn't one, Samantha snapped, fear making her voice sharp. What if she finds out we tried again? She already knows. Maggie whispered softly to herself, too low for them to hear. For a long moment, the sound of drawers slamming echoed through the house like hollow thunder. Then came silence, an exhausted, defeated quiet. James sank into the armchair beside the cold fireplace, his hands trembling in his lap. Everything's gone, he said, disbelief cutting through his anger. It's like the money doesn't even exist anymore. Samantha stared at him, her voice trembling. What are we going to do? Maggie's expression softened, not with pity, but with the final understanding that she had reached the point of no return. She walked back into her study, poured herself a cup of tea from the still warm pot, and sat by the window. The rain had slowed, the last drops sliding down the glass in thin, glistening trails. Her notebook lay open beside her, its pages filled with timestamps, notes, and the steady rhythm of control. She wrote one final entry, 9:17 a.m., bank accounts frozen, injunction confirmed. James and Samantha intercepted. No assets accessible, proof secured. The pen left a faint dent in the paper where her hand had pressed too firmly. Outside, the clouds broke, sunlight cutting across the wet pavement. The storm had passed, at least for her. And downstairs, in the study she had just vacated, James's phone buzzed with an email from the county clerk's office, a formal notice bearing Victor Hayes's signature. He opened it, read the words once, and went completely still. Notice of legal injunction. All authority and executor rights are retained by Margaret Reynolds. Unauthorized access or alteration constitutes criminal interference. He stared at the screen, pale, then dropped the phone to the floor. For the first time, he seemed to understand the scale of what he'd lost, not just the estate, but the illusion of control. The morning light came crisp and cold through the kitchen window, slicing across the silverware laid out with deliberate symmetry. Maggie Reynolds adjusted a teaspoon slightly, then stepped back and studied the table the way a conductor studies an orchestra before the first note. Everything, every chair, every document, every word she was about to say, was positioned exactly where she wanted it. By noon, the house smelled of lemon polish and steeped tea. On the sideboard, a neat stack of folders waited, copies of estate summaries and charitable allocations. None of them revealed the full truth, but each was designed to look like it did. At 12:15 sharp, the doorbell rang. James stood on the porch, his posture rehearsed into casual confidence, though the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. Samantha hovered just behind, her smile brittle. "Mom," he said lightly, "you wanted to talk?" Maggie opened the door wider. "Come in, it won't take long." They stepped inside, their eyes darting briefly toward the study door as if drawn there by habit. She caught the glance, tucked it away like another note in her ledger. In the living room, the fire burned low, the air thick with a kind of polite expectancy. At the far end of the couch sat Helen Porter, her glasses perched low on her nose, a notepad balanced on her lap. She greeted them with a small, measured smile. "I asked Helen to join us," Maggie said as she took her seat by the tea service. "She's always been a good witness for important family matters." James's brow creased. "A witness?" "Just a formality," Maggie replied smoothly. "Please, sit." He and Samantha obeyed, exchanging a brief, uncertain glance. Maggie poured tea for everyone, slowly, methodically, letting the quiet stretch thin and taut. When she finally spoke, her tone was almost conversational. "I've been reviewing the estate documents this week. Your father's will, the trusts, the account allocations. After some advice from Victor, I've decided a few updates were necessary." Samantha blinked. "Updates?" "Minor things," Maggie said, stirring her tea. "Adjustments to ensure everything remains fair and secure. It's surprising how much you learn when you revisit old paperwork." James tried for a smirk but couldn't quite manage it. "That's good, I guess. You've talked to Victor?" "Of course," Maggie said, her gaze steady. "He's ensured all legal filings are ready for distribution when the time comes." The phrase hung in the air. When the time comes. Helen's pen moved faintly against paper, her expression unreadable. Samantha shifted in her seat. "So, what kind of updates?" "Oh, mostly reallocations," Maggie said. "Charitable funds, trust structure, executor authority. All the things your father and I discussed years ago. You'll find your names are still there, of course. Just not everywhere they used to be." A pause. The fire popped softly. James's composure cracked just enough for his voice to sound tight. "You restructured things?" Maggie's smile didn't waver. "For clarity's sake, I find simplicity keeps misunderstandings at bay. Samantha reached for her cup but set it down untouched. You're saying you've already changed it? Helen looked up from her notes and interjected gently. All filings have been witnessed and notarized this morning. Victor's office confirmed the timestamp. James blinked. Wait, this morning? Yes, Maggie said. He was quite efficient. For a moment, silence stretched between them, brittle as glass. Samantha's face paled. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Mom, this feels sudden. Maybe we should have been part of those discussions. Maggie tilted her head slightly. You were. Every time you spoke, I learned something. The meaning hit him too late. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Helen watched the exchange over the rim of her teacup, the smallest trace of satisfaction flickering in her eyes. I thought today would be a good time to bring everyone up to speed, Maggie said calmly. Transparency builds trust, after all. Samantha's voice trembled as she asked, Are we still protected in the will? Oh, yes, Maggie replied softly. Everyone's protected, just not from themselves. From her pocket, her phone buzzed. A message from Victor. She glanced at it briefly, then laid the phone face down beside her cup. James caught the movement. What was that? A confirmation, she said, her tone flat. Everything's filed and effective. Helen folded her notepad shut with a quiet snap. Then that concludes our business, doesn't it? Maggie nodded once. For now. Samantha looked at James, her whisper barely audible. She already did it. He rose suddenly, pacing toward the window, trying to compose himself before turning back. Mom, I think we should talk privately. This doesn't feel right. There's nothing private about honesty, Maggie said, still seated, her hands folded neatly. For a long, tense moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then Helen stood, smoothing her skirt. I'll see myself out. Victor will call once he's verified the court acknowledgement. Maggie nodded, her gaze never leaving James and Samantha. When the front door closed behind Helen, the room seemed to shrink around them. James's voice was low now, stripped of bravado. You really changed everything. I ensured what your father wanted, Maggie said, and what I deserved. Outside, thunder rumbled distantly again, the echo of a storm that never truly left. By morning, the house had settled into that uneasy stillness that comes after confrontation, quiet but charged. Maggie stood by the window, watching pale light creep across the frost on the lawn. The teapot beside her still steamed, untouched. Her phone vibrated once. A message from Clara Lynn appeared on the lock screen. All accounts confirmed secure. No pending transfers, no access attempts successful. Maggie allowed herself a single nod before unlocking her phone and typing, Thank you, Clara. Let me know if anyone tries again. She set the phone down just as James's footsteps thundered down the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, still in his robe, face drawn with fatigue and panic. Mom, he said tightly, I think there's something wrong with the estate accounts. Maggie turned slowly, her expression perfectly calm. Oh? I tried to check balances this morning, just to make sure everything's fine after yesterday's meeting. It says access denied. That's odd, Maggie said, reaching for her tea. You're not on any of those accounts. He stared at her, caught between confusion and fury. I was. Dad listed me as a secondary years ago. Your father also expected you to act responsibly, she said quietly. Perhaps the system caught up. Samantha appeared behind him, already scrolling on her phone. I tried calling the bank. The line keeps looping me back to an automated message. It says account review in progress. How inconvenient, Maggie murmured, sipping her tea. James's tone sharpened. You know what's happening, don't you? I know everything's protected, she said, turning away. Which was the goal. He exhaled hard, raking a hand through his hair. You can't just lock us out, Mom. We're family. Maggie met his eyes then. Calm, steady, unflinching. Exactly why I had to. The room fell still except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. James opened his laptop on the dining table, muttering, I'll fix this myself. The glow from the screen washed his face pale as he typed in credentials. Each failed login made his voice louder. Invalid password. What? That's not possible. His fingers pounded harder. Access restricted. Try again later. What the hell is this? Samantha hovered behind him, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Try a different account. I am. Another denial. Maggie watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, the soft clink of her teaspoon against porcelain, the only sound that broke the tension. Her phone buzzed again. Helen this time, watching the cloud back up. Every attempt recorded. Their frustration is evidence. Maggie typed back, Good. Let's make sure Victor gets the full log. Samantha's voice cracked. Mom, the mortgage account. Our name's gone from the trust branch. What did you do? I clarified ownership, Maggie said, her voice level. It was never yours to begin with. James pushed away from the table, pacing, his pulse visible at his temple. This isn't right. It's illegal to shut us out. Only if you had a claim, she said softly. You don't. Samantha's hands trembled. You don't mean that. But Maggie didn't answer. She simply turned back to her notebook and began to write, the pen gliding in precise lines. 8:32 a.m. James attempted online access. Denied. Samantha called bank. Redirected. All systems secure. She closed the notebook carefully and looked up. Breakfast is getting cold, she said, as if the entire scene had been a misunderstanding over burnt toast. From his pocket, James's phone vibrated. He snatched it up. Another email from the bank. His eyes skimmed it quickly, then widened. Notice of restricted access. All estate accounts under review by executor authority. Contact, Margaret Reynolds. He looked up at her, voice trembling. You're listed as the only contact. I suppose that means the system works, she replied evenly. He sank into the chair, defeated. Samantha covered her face with both hands, whispering, She's locked us out of everything. Outside, the wind rattled the windows as though echoing the shift inside the house. Maggie stood still, composed, her presence now more formidable than any raised voice could have been. Another buzz from her phone. Victor's message this time. Drafting final legal notice to heirs now. Will send for your signature by noon. Maggie typed her reply slowly, her reflection steady in the window pane. Thank you. Send copies to Helen and Clara. From behind her, she heard James mutter something under his breath. Words low and bitter, lost to the hum of the heater. It didn't matter. Every sound was being recorded now. Every line preserved. She turned to face him once more, her tone measured. James, you and Samantha should take the day to regroup. The next steps will be handled legally. He looked up at her, eyes red, voice shaking with anger he couldn't control. You don't trust your own son. Maggie's reply came quiet but sharp as glass. I trusted you once. You turned that into a transaction. The silence after that felt absolute. Then, from the kitchen counter, Maggie's phone buzzed again. A new alert from Clara Lynn. Mrs. Reynolds, a flagged transfer attempt just triggered from an IP address linked to your son's business account. Would you like me to escalate this to federal fraud review? The following morning dawned with the brittle stillness of winter glass. Frost glazed the edge of every window, turning the light into pale silver shards. Maggie moved through the quiet house with her usual precision, coffee percolating, files arranged in deliberate stacks across the dining table. By 9:01 a.m., her inbox was full. Victor's overnight report was waiting at the top, marked confidential. She clicked it open, her pulse steady. Confirmed. All legal protections now permanent. Trust amendments notarized. Federal flag accepted regarding unauthorized access attempts. James Reynolds formally recorded as non-beneficiary signatory. She reread the line twice, formally recorded. There it was, the consequence her son had built with his own impatience. Her phone buzzed again. Helen, you did it. Perfectly executed. Maggie allowed herself a small smile before replying. Not yet. The rest still needs to see it. Outside, sunlight spilled across the frozen lawn. She took a moment to breathe it in, the calm before the next wave. By mid-morning, Maggie had gathered the extended Reynolds family over a group video call. Robert's sister Evelyn, his nephew Mark, and a few distant cousins who'd always seemed more interested in the family trust than in family itself. They appeared one by one on her screen, curious, polite, faintly wary. "Good morning," Maggie began, her voice composed but resolute. "I wanted to bring everyone up to date on some recent estate adjustments. Nothing dramatic. Just final clarifications." Evelyn, always the most direct of them, leaned closer to her camera. "This isn't about James, is it?" Maggie's smile was faint. "It's about ensuring Robert's wishes are respected, Evelyn. Nothing more." She clicked a document on her screen, sharing the notarized amendments. Lines of text filled the screen, new clauses, updated signatures, explicit protections. Each page carried Victor Hayes's digital watermark and a timestamp less than 12 hours old. Mark whistled softly. "You don't mess around, Aunt Maggie." "No," she said simply, "not when it comes to integrity." In another window, she noticed James's account sign in. His name appeared at the bottom of the participant list, his camera off. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't have to. Across town, James sat hunched at his desk, the glow of his laptop reflected in his tired eyes. Samantha hovered behind him, chewing her thumbnail. He'd been up all night trying to reverse the damage. Different devices, different networks. But every login attempt only triggered new alerts. Now, as the meeting streamed on his screen, he saw the truth unfold line by line. His name, the one he'd assumed was safely embedded in every document, was gone. Deleted. The legal language left no room for loopholes, no space for argument. His breathing quickened. She actually filed it," he said, voice trembling between disbelief and anger. "Everything. She made it permanent." Samantha leaned closer, her voice small. "James, maybe this is the point where you stop. She's got everything locked down, legally, financially." "Don't you start," he snapped, turning on her. "You said we could handle this. You said it was ours to fix." Her eyes filled, but she said nothing. The distance between them felt colder than the morning outside. From the call, Maggie's voice continued, calm and precise. "These changes guarantee the estate's protection indefinitely. Victor has ensured that no party, family or otherwise, can contest the trust without direct court approval." James felt the room tilt. Every word from his mother now felt like a slow tightening noose. Maggie paused as though sensing him through the screen. "And of course, we have full documentation of all recent activity. Every login, every access attempt, every call. Victor's office has copies, as does the federal audit branch." Samantha gasped. "You recorded—" James muted the call, slamming his laptop shut. "She's bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. In the quiet of her living room, Maggie closed her own laptop. The video call ended with polite farewells and strained smiles, but the silence that followed was sweet. She poured herself a fresh cup of tea and opened her notebook to the latest page. January 17th. Amendments finalized, family informed, evidence logged. Then another message came in, from Victor this time. "Everything's filed. Congratulations, Maggie. It's officially irreversible. Her phone buzzed again almost instantly. Helen. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call. Maggie answered, her voice soft. I watched the meeting, Helen said. You were magnificent. The way you didn't even mention James's name. It was cutting without cruelty. Like a surgeon. Maggie chuckled quietly. He wanted power. I gave him consequence. Helen laughed under her breath. You really did. Perfectly executed. For the first time in days, Maggie allowed herself to sit back and look out the window. Snow had begun to fall again, flakes tumbling in slow, deliberate spirals. Robert would be proud, Helen added. Maggie's eyes softened, her reflection faint in the glass. He would have been disappointed it came to this. But yes, proud, I think. As she hung up, she turned the page in her notebook, preparing to draft the final trust clause. But before she could begin, a new email pinged on her screen. From James Reynolds. Subject: We need to talk. Before you do something you can't undo. The next morning unfolded like the calm after a storm, too still, too measured. Maggie sat at her kitchen counter, coffee steaming beside her laptop as she waited for Victor's video call to connect. When his face appeared, framed by the polished mahogany backdrop of his Lexington office, he looked every bit the embodiment of quiet precision. It's official, he said without preamble. The court has acknowledged your standing as legal guardian of the estate's distribution. Your executor powers are now absolute, Maggie. She exhaled slowly, a quiet breath of relief. That means no contest can proceed? Victor smiled faintly. Not without full judicial review, and given the documentation we've submitted, any challenge would collapse before it reached a hearing. Maggie nodded, steady but inwardly exhausted. Good. I'd rather he learn that from the system than from me. Trust me, Victor said, adjusting his tie. He's about to. Across town, James Reynolds stood outside the Fayette County Records Office, his phone pressed hard to his ear. Voice sharp enough to cut through traffic. What do you mean it's sealed? He barked. I'm his son. I'm legally entitled to see the file. The clerk's tone over the line was calm, bureaucratic. Sir, the record is protected under a private guardianship designation. Only the named executor has access. James's fingers tightened around the phone. That's my mother. Yes, sir, the voice replied, unbothered. Then I suggest you speak with her. He hung up and stared at the courthouse steps, the reality hitting him in slow, stinging waves. The law wasn't bending for him. It wasn't even listening. Samantha stood a few feet away, glued to her phone screen, her face pale. James. She posted the verification notice. He turned sharply. What? On the county public ledger. It's time-stamped. Everyone can see it. It's already gone through the system. He grabbed the phone from her, eyes darting across the official digital page. There it was, black and white proof of everything Maggie had just accomplished. Legal guardianship of estate distribution, Margaret A. Reynolds, active and enforceable. He lowered the phone slowly, disbelief washing over him. She locked it in permanently. Samantha's voice trembled. Then it's done. We can't. We're not finished, he snapped. There's always a loophole. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. Back at the Reynolds house, Helen arrived just before lunch. She stepped in with the same effortless composure that always steadied Maggie's world. I brought muffins, she said lightly, setting the basket on the counter. You look like you've been running a marathon in slow motion. Maggie gave a small smile. It feels that way. Helen took off her gloves, settling across from her friend. Victor called me after the filing went through. He said he's never seen anyone turn an estate case this tight, this fast. Robert used to say, preparation is patience in disguise, Maggie murmured. Guess I finally understood what he meant. Helen leaned back, watching her carefully. You realize what you've done, don't you? You've shifted the household power entirely. They can't touch a cent, can't alter a line, can't even petition without your signature. Maggie looked out the window where a light snowfall had started again. Then maybe now, she said softly, I can breathe again. By mid-afternoon, the shift Helen described had already reached the outside world. James's fury had spilled online. A single post appeared on his social media page. Public, panicked, and desperate. Imagine your own mother stealing your inheritance and hiding behind lawyers. Arth corruption, our family betrayal. It spread fast, but within the hour, every comment thread was flooded with quiet corrections, official filings, legal links, county confirmations. The digital storm he tried to spark fizzled beneath the weight of fact. Samantha deleted her account by sundown. Victor called Maggie just after 5. He tried filing an emergency appeal. It was dismissed in under 30 minutes. Expected, Maggie said, her tone calm but not cold. Did they even bother to read the injunction? They didn't have to, Victor replied. It's airtight. Good, she said. Then that's that. As night settled, Maggie and Helen sat together by the fire. The light flickered across Maggie's notebook. Open to the latest entry, January 18th. Guardianship confirmed. Executor powers final. James's appeal denied. Helen looked at her over the rim of her teacup. You've won, Maggie. Maggie nodded, though her expression carried no triumph, only quiet closure. I didn't want to win, she said. I wanted to be safe. Helen reached over, resting her hand on Maggie's. You are. The fire crackled, soft and rhythmic, filling the room with the kind of warmth only earned after weathering a storm. Maggie allowed herself to close her eyes for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She picked it up, expecting another message from Victor. But it wasn't from him. From Lexington County Court notification subject, notice of intent to contest, filed by James Reynolds. Maggie's brow furrowed. She opened the attachment and froze. There it was. A petition stamped received. But beneath the rejection notice was a line Victor hadn't filed. Something new. An attached claim referencing a previous undisclosed amendment allegedly signed by Robert Reynolds before his death. Her breath caught. That document shouldn't exist. The following week unfolded like a steady, deliberate waltz. Maggie moved through each day with quiet precision, signing, notarizing, confirming, her routines unfolding with the same care she once gave her lesson plans back when she taught. Only now, her pupils weren't students. They were institutions, foundations, and charities, each one chosen for a reason that mattered. The first wire transfer went out on Monday morning. It was small, symbolic, a scholarship fund for underprivileged high school seniors in Lexington. Robert would have liked that. By Tuesday, 3 more donations were in motion: the animal rescue where they'd adopted their old Labrador, a veterans counseling center downtown, and a women's shelter on Winchester Road. Each allocation was neatly itemized, every cent accounted for. At precisely 10 a.m., Victor called. Maggie, he said, the faint hum of office chatter in the background. The transfers went through flawlessly. The funds are now held under charitable trust designations. Everything's permanent. Permanent? She repeated, a trace of satisfaction in her voice. Absolutely. Legally irreversible. Once charitable distributions are verified, they're untouchable by heirs. Even I couldn't revoke them now if I wanted to. Maggie smiled faintly. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. James won't like it, Victor warned. He doesn't have to, she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. He just has to live with it. Victor paused, as if debating whether to add something more, then said quietly, You've done something remarkable, Maggie. Ruthless, yes, but remarkable. She gave a soft chuckle. Ruthless is just another word for finished. By mid-afternoon, Helen stopped by with her usual knock, 2 short, 1 long, the same rhythm she'd used since they were girls sneaking out to each other's houses in the summer. "I come bearing lemon bars," Helen announced as she stepped in, her breath visible in the cold air. "And gossip." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "The good kind or the useful kind?" Helen grinned. "Both. Your son's been calling around town. Attorneys, brokers, even Clara at the bank. He's trying to figure out where the money went." Maggie stirred her tea, unbothered. "He'll find it," she said. "Just not where he expects." Helen leaned against the counter, watching her friend's calm precision. "You're terrifying when you're peaceful." "I'm peaceful," Maggie said, smiling slightly, "because I'm finished fighting." Helen tilted her head. "Or because you've already won." Neither of them laughed, but they both smiled like they understood something bigger than words. Across town, James sat slumped in his office chair, his tie loosened, the blinds half drawn. The desk was littered with printouts, financial reports, trust statements, legal copies, all confirming what he already knew. Every dollar he thought he could leverage, every account he believed he could reclaim, was gone, redirected. Samantha stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "She gave it away," she said softly. "To strangers." He looked up at her, hollow-eyed. "To causes she can hide behind." "Maybe she's right," Samantha whispered. "Maybe this was never ours." He shot her a look sharp enough to cut through her doubt. It was supposed to be. But as he spoke, the words sounded small, even to him. At dusk, Maggie and Helen sat by the window overlooking the snow-dusted garden. The house glowed with the warm amber of quiet victory. A single candle flickered between them, its light catching on the rim of Maggie's teacup. Helen took a slow sip and broke the silence. "Do you ever think he'll come around?" Maggie watched the twilight settle on the horizon, her voice calm. "Not for me, but maybe someday. For himself." They sat together in companionable silence, the kind shared only by women who've seen too much to need constant talking. After a while, Helen stood to leave. "You've earned your peace, Maggie. Don't let him take it from you again." Maggie nodded. "He won't." When the door closed behind her, the house fell into stillness once more. Maggie walked back to her desk and opened her notebook. On the fresh page, she wrote with careful precision, January 25th. All charitable distributions complete. James resigned to silence, estate secure. She capped her pen, leaned back in her chair, and looked toward Robert's photograph on the mantel. "It's done, love," she whispered. "Your legacy's where it belongs." Her phone buzzed on the desk. Another message from Victor. She smiled, expecting another confirmation, but as she unlocked it, her eyes narrowed. From County Records Office. Subject: Notice of new filing, supplementary will, unsigned copy. Her hand went cold around the phone. By dawn the next day, the fog had rolled in thick over Lexington, blurring the streetlights into muted halos. Inside the Reynolds house, every lamp glowed low and golden as Maggie methodically packed the last of her estate folders into labeled envelopes. Each one bore her neat handwriting, sharp, deliberate, impossible to misread. On the dining table sat 3 stacks: legal filings, charitable transfers, and estate deeds. Beneath them, a 4th pile, smaller, sealed with a crimson wax stamp, read simply, "Private correspondence." She placed it into a lockbox, turned the key, and whispered to herself, "Every loose end, tied." Her phone pinged. A message from Victor. "All filings received and verified." County clerk confirmed archival. "You're officially untouchable." Maggie smiled faintly. "That's a word I could get used to." She sipped her tea, the steam curling against her glasses as the faint hum of the furnace filled the silence. Her house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt restored, clean of tension, free of noise. But elsewhere, a new storm brewed. At 10:45 a.m., James's sedan idled 2 houses down, condensation fogging the windshield. Inside, he gripped his steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Samantha sat beside him, her hands trembling around her phone. "She's moved everything," she muttered. "The bank confirmed it. They said all the files are in county storage now. You can't even request copies without her approval." James's jaw clenched. "There's still one place she can't lock me out of." He shoved the car door open and strode toward the house. "James, don't!" Samantha hissed, but he was already halfway up the drive. The front door was, of course, locked. Still, he knew the spare key's hiding spot, under the stone planter, the same one that had sat there since his childhood. He crouched, fingers brushing against the smooth ceramic edge, but when he lifted it, nothing. Just cold cement. He froze, the realization crawling up his spine. Through the window he saw movement. Maggie in her study, her back to him, calm as ever. A kettle whistled faintly in the background. She hadn't even looked up. He turned away, jaw tight, and stomped back to the car. "She changed everything," he said, voice shaking. "Even the damn key." Samantha didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again, notifications from social media piling up. Her last post, the one airing their grievances publicly, was now flooded with replies, screenshots of court filings, legal notices, even a quote from Victor's press statement. "The Reynolds estate has been legally and permanently distributed under verified guardianship. No pending disputes remain." Samantha's face flushed with humiliation. "They're laughing at us," she whispered. James didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at the frost gathering on the windshield until it blurred everything beyond recognition. Back inside, Maggie placed the last envelope in her desk drawer and exhaled. Her phone buzzed again. Helen this time. "You've done it, Maggie. Everything's sealed, filed, and final." Maggie typed back, "It's strange. Winning feels quieter than I imagined." Within seconds, Helen's reply came through. "Quiet is good. Quiet means peace." Maggie smiled, the smallest lift at the corner of her mouth. She carried her teacup to the living room and sank into her favorite chair by the window. The garden outside shimmered beneath a thin layer of frost. Still, pristine, untouched. Her fingers brushed against the locket she wore around her neck, Robert's old one, the tiny gold clasp worn from years of his fidgeting with it. She opened it, tracing his photograph with her thumb. "It's all right now," she murmured. "No one can touch what we built." From the fireplace mantel, the clock ticked softly, steady, unhurried. For a long moment, Maggie simply sat there, letting the quiet fill the house. The war was over. Or so she thought. Her phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't Victor or Helen. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, then opened the text. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Deputy Clerk Morgan at the County Records Office. We need to confirm whether you submitted a second copy of your husband's supplementary will last night. It appears another version was filed under your authorization code." Maggie froze, pulse quickening. She hadn't authorized anything. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen as the second message arrived. "This version lists your son as co-beneficiary of the charitable trusts. Do you wish to dispute it before validation?" Her teacup slipped slightly in her grip, the rim clinking against the saucer. The gray light of morning crept across the living room, catching the edges of Maggie's notebook and the teacup she'd left untouched all night. She hadn't slept. Her mind had been fixed on the deputy clerk's message, those 2 words that had burned into her thoughts. Co-beneficiary filed. Her first call, at dawn, had been to Victor, The man was nothing if not efficient. Within the hour, he confirmed the forgery. "Someone tried to use your authorization credentials," he explained, his voice tight but controlled. "The timestamps between 11:45 p.m. and midnight. Whoever did it had access to your digital signature file." Maggie's hand trembled slightly as she held the phone. "It was James," she said flatly. "I can't confirm that yet," Victor replied. "But rest assured, the submission's invalid. I've already filed a formal nullification request. By this afternoon, it'll be erased from the record." "Erase it," Maggie said quietly. "Every trace." "It'll be done." She hung up, staring through the frost-blurred window at the skeletal outline of the garden beyond. Snow had fallen again overnight. Soft, steady, silent. She reached for her notebook and wrote in small, careful letters, January 27th. Attempted false filing under my name. Action nullified. Her pen hovered a moment longer, then she added, "Patience is protection." The phone buzzed again, startling her. A new message blinked across the screen. James. "Mom, please." "We didn't know. I swear." She stared at the text, expression unreadable. Then another followed. "I made a mistake. We were desperate. I didn't mean to cross a line." Her fingers rested over the keyboard, motionless. Finally, she locked the phone, placed it face down, and whispered to the empty room, "Yes, you did." By noon, Samantha had taken a different approach. Her social media post appeared under the guise of contrition, an image of the Reynolds home at sunset with a caption that read, "Family should forgive. Money isn't worth losing love." It lasted 4 hours before the replies buried it. Screenshots of legal filings, comments from colleagues, even quotes from her own earlier accusations. One user wrote simply, "Forgiveness is for the honest." The post disappeared by evening. Maggie spent the afternoon with Victor on a secure call. The sound of his pen tapping faintly against his desk came through the speaker. "I've locked everything down," he said. "Every credential, every file, every possible signature. The system now requires in-person verification for you only. No one else can so much as breathe near the estate records." "Good," Maggie replied. "What about the attempted amendment?" "Flagged, recorded, and permanently deleted," Victor confirmed. "There's no longer a legal footprint. It's as if it never existed." Maggie smiled faintly. "Almost poetic, isn't it? Trying to rewrite the past and being erased instead." Victor chuckled softly. "Poetic justice is still justice." That evening, Helen arrived, bundled in her winter coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. She stepped into the study with a thermos in one hand and a warm grin. "I brought coffee this time," she said. "You've had enough tea to drown a lawyer." Maggie looked up from her desk, the faintest glimmer of amusement breaking through her exhaustion. "You always know when to appear?" Helen set the thermos down beside her. "Victor called me. He said you handled today with more grace than he's seen in 30 years of practice." "I didn't handle it," Maggie said quietly. "I endured it." "That's the same thing," Helen replied, taking a seat across from her. "Only better. Endurance means you stayed steady. Grace means they noticed." Maggie closed her notebook, folding her hands over the cover. "He texted me," she said. Helen's eyebrows lifted. "James." Maggie nodded. "He said they didn't know. That they were desperate." Helen leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. "And you?" "I ignored him." Helen smiled sadly. "Good. Some apologies are just strategies with prettier words." The two women sat in silence for a moment. The fire crackled in the hearth, painting soft gold across Maggie's face. "You were right, Helen," Maggie said after a long pause. "Winning isn't loud, it's quiet, like breathing again after holding it too long." Helen reached across the table and touched her hand. "You earned every breath." Maggie nodded, her gaze drifting toward the window where snow continued to fall in steady, patient flakes. Years, she murmured. It took years of silence, of pretending not to see. But patience always outlasts greed. Helen smiled. And truth always outlasts panic. They shared a small, knowing look, the kind that needed no translation. As Helen stood to leave, Maggie rose too, walking her to the door. The night outside was silver and soft, the air thick with new snow. "Maggie," Helen said, pausing on the porch. "You did it. It's over now." "Maybe," Maggie said. "But storms don't end just because you stop hearing thunder." When the door shut and the house fell quiet again, Maggie returned to her desk. Her phone blinked once more. Another text from James. "We're sorry. We'll stop. Please don't take any more action." Maggie read it, then slowly typed her reply. "There's nothing left to take." She hit send and set the phone aside. For the first time in months, she leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and allowed herself to feel the silence. It wasn't empty this time. It was earned. The snow had melted into a wet shimmer along the Lexington sidewalks by the time the first article appeared. It wasn't front-page news, just a small column buried in the Herald Ledger's business section. But the headline caught attention all the same. "Local Widow Executes Landmark Estate Protection Strategy." By mid-morning, Maggie's phone had begun buzzing. Neighbors, colleagues, even an old student calling to congratulate her. The tone of each message was the same: admiration, surprise, curiosity. Helen was the first to show up in person. She came armed with her usual thermos of coffee and that half-smile that said, "I told you so." "You've made quite the impression," Helen said, handing Maggie the newspaper. "They're calling it the Reynolds model. Apparently, your case is being used in a seminar at the law school downtown." Maggie gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "After 70 years of quiet living, I've become a case study." "You've become the example," Helen corrected gently. "You handled a high-value estate, deflected internal fraud, and managed to preserve every cent. People notice when integrity wins." Maggie looked at the photo beside the headline, a grainy shot of her standing outside the courthouse last month, wrapped in her winter coat, expression unreadable. She'd thought no one had been watching. "Integrity," she murmured, folding the paper. "Funny word for surviving your own family." Helen's expression softened. "You didn't just survive them, Maggie. You outthought them. That's rarer." Maggie poured tea for both of them, the familiar ritual grounding her. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said. "I did it because Robert deserved peace. Because I did too." "Sometimes peace looks like justice," Helen said quietly. By afternoon, the recognition had spread further than Maggie liked. Victor called between meetings, his tone a mix of pride and cautious amusement. "Well," he said, "I always suspected your case might attract attention, but I didn't expect you to become a local legend." "Legend sounds like a word for someone gone," Maggie said dryly. He chuckled. "Your modesty's charming, but the truth is, your documentation process, those logs, your timestamps, your recorded evidence, have impressed half the county's legal circuit. The Bar Association reached out this morning for a briefing copy." "Victor," Maggie said lightly, "if this turns into a speaking invitation, I'll send you instead." He laughed, then paused, voice softening. "Maggie, in all my years of estate law, I've never seen someone defend their legacy so completely. Everything's locked. Every asset, every clause, every charitable trust. It's unshakable." Even the Federal Review came back clean. For a moment, she said nothing, just listened to the faint hum of his office through the phone. "Thank you," she said finally, "for being patient when I wasn't." "You were more patient than you give yourself credit for," Victor replied. "That patience won you everything." The quiet satisfaction of victory didn't extend to everyone. Across town, James had begun to feel the weight of social consequence. Word of his failed attempts, especially the forged amendment, had circulated quietly through professional circles. No one said it directly, but the looks lingered. Real estate clients hesitating, colleagues declining lunch invites. The whispers were worse than the silence. Samantha fared no better. Her social accounts were ghost towns now, every post either locked or deleted. When she did appear, it was to issue vague performative statements about forgiveness and learning from mistakes. No one engaged. Maggie never gloated. She didn't need to. The quiet was satisfaction enough. That weekend, Helen came over again. She found Maggie in the sunroom, trimming dead leaves from the potted violets Robert had given her on their 40th anniversary. Still working even when the garden's asleep, Helen teased. Everything worth keeping needs maintenance, Maggie said, setting the shears down. Helen smiled, settling across from her. Did you hear? The Lexington Daily Chronicle wants to interview you. They're doing a feature on women over 60 managing estates without legal intermediaries. Maggie looked up, surprised. Why me? Because you didn't fold, Helen said. Because you did what half the men in this town couldn't do without 3 assistants and a panic attack. Maggie chuckled softly. I'll think about it. Helen grinned. You won't need to. They'll call you tomorrow. The call came not the next day, but that evening. Maggie was sitting at her writing desk, the glow of her lamp reflecting against the dark window, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was bright, polished, too young to have lived anything but curious enough to ask. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Taylor Briggs from American Heritage Monthly. I know this is short notice, but we're preparing a feature on strategic estate planning in contemporary America, and your name keeps coming up. Your attorney calls it textbook foresight. Maggie blinked, caught off guard. My name keeps coming up? Yes, ma'am. In fact, our editor would love to highlight your story. The human side, not just the legal. How you managed the emotional toll, the family complexities, the patience it took to safeguard your husband's legacy. We'd be honored to tell it. Maggie sat back in her chair, her heart steady, but her thoughts quickening. She'd spent years protecting privacy, guarding every detail. The idea of letting the world peer inside felt like opening a locked door she'd built for survival. Mrs. Reynolds, the voice asked again, tentative, would you be willing to talk about what you've learned? Her eyes drifted toward Robert's photograph on the mantel, his smile faint and timeless. She hesitated, then said softly, some lessons are too private to print. I understand, the young voice replied, disappointed. But, may I at least send you a draft? You might find it worthwhile. Send it, Maggie said. When the call ended, she sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the wind picked up again, whistling faintly through the eaves. Her phone buzzed once more, a message from Victor. Don't be alarmed, but the magazine's request triggered a federal reference check. Someone reopened Robert's archived file. The following week began quietly, with the kind of calm that no longer felt foreign to Maggie Reynolds. Outside, early February sunlight cut through the frost, glinting off the glass bird feeder that Robert had built years ago. Cardinals fluttered around it, red streaks against the pale sky, bold and unbothered. Inside, Maggie's dining table had been transformed into something like a small salon. 4 women from her old book club sat in a gentle semicircle, porcelain teacups steaming, notebooks open, eyes on Maggie as though she were hosting a seminar instead of an afternoon tea. So, asked Nora Phillips, a retired accountant with a wry smile, what exactly did you do that every attorney in town is talking about? Maggie smiled faintly. I paid attention, she said, to details, to people, to how quickly entitlement wears the mask of affection. The women laughed, But Helen, seated at the far end of the table, only smiled knowingly and passed a plate of lemon cookies around. Maggie continued, her tone gentle but deliberate. The hardest part wasn't managing the assets. It was managing my own patience. Greed doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps. It sounds like concern, like advice, like family. That should be a quote in a book, Nora said, scribbling something into her notebook. Maggie chuckled softly. If it is, I'd title it, What They Didn't Learn. Helen raised her cup in a mock toast. To lessons learned late. To lessons taught, Maggie corrected, her voice calm but edged with steel. By the time the women left, the afternoon sun had softened to amber. Helen lingered, as always, tidying the table with the easy familiarity of a lifelong friend. You handled that like a professor, Helen said, stacking plates. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were giving a master class. Maggie smiled faintly. Maybe that's all I've ever done. Teach people who didn't want to listen. They're listening now, Helen said. Outside, a breeze rattled the window panes. The sound carried a strange echo, faint, distant, but grounding. Maggie poured fresh tea for both of them. You know, Helen said, lowering her voice. The Chronicle ran another piece this morning about your strategic foresight. They quoted Victor, too. He called you the gold standard for modern estate integrity. Maggie shook her head. I never wanted to be a standard. I just wanted to be left alone. Helen smiled softly. And yet, your quiet made the loudest noise. Across town, James scrolled through the article from the front seat of his car. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't open. Friends offering cautious sympathy, colleagues feigning ignorance. His reflection in the screen looked older, sharper, smaller somehow. Samantha sat beside him, staring at nothing. You know they're all talking, she said finally, about the forgery, the filings, the— Let them, James cut in, voice low and flat. They already decided who's the villain. Samantha hesitated, then whispered, Maybe we were. James said nothing. He started the engine, the sound loud in the stillness, and drove without direction. Back in the Reynolds home, Helen poured another cup of tea, the steam curling upward like breath. You know, she said, for all their scheming, I don't think James or Samantha ever understood what you were really teaching. Maggie tilted her head. And what was that? That control isn't about money, it's about peace. You protected peace, Maggie. That's rarer than any inheritance. Maggie smiled faintly. Peace, she repeated, testing the word as if it were fragile. Robert would have liked hearing that. They sat together in the warmth of the sunroom, the fading light catching on the fine china and silver teaspoons. The world outside seemed smaller now, quieter. Maggie took a slow sip, savoring it, before setting the cup down. I've been thinking about another contribution, she said suddenly. Something bigger. A trust for teachers' pensions, maybe. Robert always said public service should pay in dignity, if not in dollars. Helen's face lit up. That's beautiful. You'd be making his name live twice. Maggie nodded. It's already living. I just want to make sure it stays clean. As dusk deepened, Helen gathered her coat. You've done enough, you know, she said softly. You don't need to keep giving. Maggie smiled. That's the only thing worth keeping, what you give. They embraced briefly at the door, and when Helen left, the house fell into its familiar rhythm again, quiet but alive. Maggie returned to her desk, opened her notebook, and began writing in her small, deliberate script. February 3rd. Lessons shared. Trusts intact. Peace sustained. She underlined the final word twice. Then, her computer chimed. Another email notification slid into the corner of the screen, an unfamiliar sender once again. She frowned. It wasn't from Victor, or Helen, or the magazine. The subject line read, Re-inquiry, Robert Reynolds' archival access log. Unusual activity noted. Her heartbeat quickened. She clicked it open. The message was brief, clinical, almost sterile. Mrs. Reynolds, our digital archive shows recent unauthorized viewing of your late husband's 2018 account ledgers. Access originated from your residence's IP address at 11:02 p.m. last night. Please confirm if this was you. Maggie froze. She hadn't been online last night. The morning after the strange email, the house was too quiet, so still that even the ticking of the mantel clock felt louder than it should have. Maggie sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the computer screen, rereading the message that had unsettled her night. She hadn't accessed Robert's archives, but someone had. A knock startled her. 3 measured taps, familiar in rhythm. Helen stepped inside without waiting for an answer, wrapped in her wool coat, her breath trailing faintly in the cold. "Maggie," she said softly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." Maggie turned the monitor toward her. "Maybe I have." Helen leaned closer, reading the message. "From your IP address?" "I was asleep at 11, Maggie said. "It wasn't me." Helen's expression tightened. "Then someone's still trying to crawl through the cracks." "Not for long." Maggie opened her laptop and dialed Victor's direct number. He answered on the first ring. "Victor, I need confirmation. Immediate. Was there any authorized access to Robert's old ledgers last night?" He hesitated. "No, but I did notice a ping in the archive's log before the firewall locked it. It looks like someone tried to pull an export, an amateur attempt, but clever enough to get flagged." "Can it be traced?" Maggie asked. Victor's tone sharpened. "Already in motion. By the end of the day, every remaining file tied to Robert's name will be transferred into offline custody. You'll have physical keys and paper trails. No more digital access. No more vulnerabilities." Maggie's voice steadied. "Good. I want every safeguard you can manage, permanently." By mid-afternoon, the papers arrived, delivered by courier in sealed brown envelopes stamped with the Lexington Trust insignia. Each one carried embossed seals, witness signatures, and Victor's precise initials in black ink. Maggie reviewed them with meticulous care before storing them in her cedar lockbox, the same one Robert had once used to keep their mortgage deeds. When she turned the key, she felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not victory, but completion. From now on, the world could only look at what was hers. It could no longer touch it. Helen watched from across the room, silent but proud. "You've done it, Maggie," she said finally. "You've closed every door they could possibly pry open." Maggie looked up, the faintest smile softening her face. "Doors were meant to close, Helen. That's what makes them safe." Across town, James and Samantha sat in their kitchen surrounded by unopened mail, most of it from law firms returning declined consultations. A heavy stillness hung between them. "It's over," Samantha said at last, voice barely above a whisper. "The attorneys won't touch it. She's got federal certification now. There's nothing left to contest." James didn't answer. He just stared at the last envelope in front of him, an official statement confirming that all trust access had been permanently revoked. His fingers trembled as he crumpled it into a fist. "She destroyed me," he muttered. Samantha looked at him, something brittle and sharp in her expression. "No, James, you destroyed yourself. She just made sure you noticed." That evening, Helen stopped by Clara Lynn's townhouse for tea, a small private gathering that felt half like celebration and half like relief. The 3 women sat around a polished oak table, Helen calm and wry, Clara precise as ever, and Maggie quietly radiant in her wool sweater. Clara poured the first round. "I have to say," she murmured, "I've frozen plenty of accounts in my career, but never with this much finesse. Mrs. Reynolds, you could have run the entire branch." Maggie smiled. "I only ran a classroom. Turns out the principles aren't that different. Helen laughed softly. Discipline, preparation, consequences. You were always good at those. Maggie lifted her teacup in a slow toast. And loyalty. Don't forget that. They clinked porcelain lightly, the sound delicate but resolute. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The peace was comfortable. Earned. I got the final notice from Victor, Maggie said after a while. Everything's sealed. County records, charitable trusts, the house, even the copyrights for Robert's work. It's all untouchable now. Clara nodded. Irrevocable protections confirmed this afternoon. It's airtight. Helen exhaled, finally letting her shoulders relax. Then that's it. No more fires to put out. Maggie leaned back, eyes drifting toward the window where twilight stretched over the garden. The frost shimmered like glass, catching the faint reflection of her own face. A woman who had spent her life teaching patience and finally mastered it herself. Funny, she said quietly. When this started, I thought I was just protecting his memory, but really, I was finishing his lesson. Helen tilted her head. Which was, that piece isn't inherited. You build it, brick by brick, even if you have to build it alone. The three women fell silent again, the clock ticking softly in the background. The warmth from the teapot fogged the window glass, blurring the winter world outside. For the first time since Robert's death, Maggie felt stillness without fear. Later that night, after Helen and Clara had left, Maggie moved through the quiet house one last time. She checked the locks, extinguished the lamps, and paused by the study door. The faint smell of cedar and paper filled the air. The scent of order restored. She sat at her desk, opened her notebook to the final page, and wrote in her careful, deliberate script. February 10th. Every account secure. Every door closed. Every key accounted for. Then, below it, she added one last line, the truth she had earned the hard way. Peace is not forgiveness. Peace is closure. Maggie capped her pen, slid the notebook into the lockbox beside the legal documents, and turned the key with steady fingers. The sound of the lock clicking shut was clean, final. She poured herself one last cup of tea, the steam curling upward like the quiet exhale of a long battle won. As she carried it to the window, the reflection of her own face merged faintly with Robert's framed photo. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but certain, anchored in the memory of that night when everything began. I returned from the airport for my late husband's will, she whispered, lifting her cup, and heard my son plotting. I secured everything before they even knew what hit them.